welcome to the guinea pig edition of Soccer Down here. It is an afternoon delight edition, troubleshooting and trying some new stuff and testing out some new equipment. So please give us your feedback. Let us know if everything sounds okay on the other end. Jason Longshore, John Nelson here with you this afternoon, catching up on everything from a busy evening in soccer around the A and around the country. We were busy last night with a very cool event over at Eventide Brewing, fundraiser for Soccer in the Streets, the ATL Champions League kickoff event and draw. Got to talk to lots of old friends, meet some new friends, and, have some beer and raise some money for the kids, which is always a good thing.
Drinking #for the kids.
Yes, it's a good thing. There are no complaints.
No. But it was a good night for Soccer in the Streets. It was fun. Yes, that kind of reminded folks that was the late night that we had, and just a reminder to everybody to kind of keep your eye on the weather if you're going to root on people or if you're going to be participating. So. Keep an eye on things from, I think, Friday afternoon, I think, is the window that they have to sit there and say if lightning is going to be involved. But just keep an eye on your favorite meteorologically based channel/application and keep your fingers crossed that we'll all be up there on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, late in the day, Friday, have a pretty good sense of what the weather's going to look like and if this event's going to be able to take place on Sunday. Well, let's get into, I think, what a lot of people wanted to talk about. And yes, John Nason, we are doing this during the Nations League semifinal. It's a good reminder, though. I will throw that game on because, it's a fun one to keep an eye on. But
goalless in the 23rd.
Yeah, no shock. We will get into the United States and Jamaica from last night. Jamaica in a friendly 1-0 win over the U.S. Have you had a chance to go back and watch it, John?
I mean, I was watching it while we were doing the show last night.
Yeah, so you were probably more free to watch last night. I just watched it back a little bit ago. So
for me,
what
the best way that I could it was clunky. I did not anticipate any real breaking news coming out of it. Honestly, I thought it was going to be a goalless draw, and that's just what my brain was telling me. But when you have a goal from Jamaica that was just an absolute rocket, and you just you get it past Zach Steffen, you get out of there with a 1-0 win. But really, for me, it was just kind of clunky and kind of there. It was a 75 that you couldn't dance to if you were looking for Raider record. Yeah,
well, I got a bigger problem with it than that. This is
all
Jamaica on U.S. soil, and you should not be getting outplayed by a team primarily filled with USL Championship players. And you were outplayed. You were flat out outplayed by Jamaica. That's not good enough. I know you're trying stuff. Remember when the whole coaching carousel was spinning round and round and round for the U.S., and it's like, well, are they going to do something? Are they going to announce something? Is it going to happen? Well, now that they did it at this point, you don't have really much time to prepare for the Gold Cup, and pressure just ratcheted up. Well, pressure just ratcheted up even more. It's not good enough. I'm sorry. If you're trying stuff but you still play well, fine. You were outplayed on home soil by Jamaica. That shouldn't be acceptable. It shouldn't be. And it's just, I don't know, some of the conversation is really strange to me. My biggest issue coming out of it is what happened afterwards. You have the Gold Cup roster announced, and Josh Sargent, who played last night and was probably one of the better players for the U.S., which isn't saying a ton, is not on the Gold Cup roster. Well, yeah. He was not on the U20 roster either. And that's the issue here. If you're not taking him to the U20s, completely understandable because he's going to be part of your Gold Cup roster. When you don't take him to the U20s and then you don't put him on said Gold Cup roster, you wasted a summer of Josh Sargent. You wasted a summer of national team development, and that's a massive problem. If you weren't going to take him to the Gold Cup, if there was any concern about taking him to the Gold Cup, he's got to go to the U20s. Flat out, period. If you don't take him to the U20s, he is written in Sharpie on your Gold Cup roster. It's not let's push it down the road. No, he needs to play in one of the tournaments. He's too important of a piece going forward for the U.S. national team. You can't waste a summer of national team appearances. And that's what they've done with this decision. Very, very, very difficult. That's the biggest issue I have with it. Get into roster on the Gold Cup in a minute further, but let's talk about how this match started. So, 3 center backs, Tim Ream, Omar Gonzalez, Matt Miazga. Anthony Robinson on the left side, Paul Areola on the right in sort of wing-back roles. You had essentially 4 central midfielders kind of dividing up the offensive and the defensive duties. It was Will Trapp, it was Georgi Mihailovic, it was Jackson Ewell, and it was Christian Roldan. Just not enough definition in the roles, and that's the biggest disappointment here. It felt like a theoretical exercise that is just being thrown on the field to see what happens, as opposed to a team that had prepared in this shape and was ready to get something out of it. I think Georgi Mihailovic is a good fit for this type of situation because he can do the role of a 10, he can do the role of an 8, he reads the game well. Thought he was fine. I felt like Jackson Ewell should have been higher up the field. Christian Roldan should have been deeper. I'm not a big fan of Roldan as an attacking linchpin. I don't really get that. They dropped too deep to defend when they were forced backwards, again, against a Jamaican team that is filled with mostly USL Championship players. This shape, this style of play, and I think the primary system that Greg Berhalter wants to play as well, so much talk about system in this, both are dependent on having possession. When you're not controlling possession against Jamaica, what makes you think you're going to control possession against higher level competition? And if you're not, then you have to have a strategy to deal with that. It feels very short-sighted so far. My 2 questions coming out of this, watching it back and reading some of the takes and thinking about it, there's not questions that are brand new for where I've been with Greg Berhalter and the national team, but the 2 I keep coming back to are, is the system more important or are the players more important at this level, in this program, in this project? And how different of an answer and how different of a situation is it when you're talking about a national team versus a club team? I don't know if the transition for Greg Berhalter from club team defining a system is translating yet to the national team level, where I think the players on hand are far more important than a system, because you can't control what players you have with the national team in the same way. You have what you have to a degree. You can pick your pool, you can pick your roster, but you can't go sign somebody new from another team. Club team, you can. I'm concerned about how all of that is coming together. And honestly, we shouldn't be surprised, because Greg Berhalter has not had his full complement of players probably ever yet. And now he's going to go into a competition that I still believe that now anything less than reaching the Gold Cup final is a failure. And it's going to be treated as such, and it's going to be a huge problem for the program going forward. All that pressure has ratcheted up, and I don't know if the team is ready to deal with it.
I thought that Josh Sargent ended up being wasted, if not once but twice, in two separate avenues. What are we calling people chiming in today? Overreaction Thursday
It can
or
be
Thursday
any of
thoughts?
the above, all of the above.
Well, Daniel Price has done all the above already. Overreaction Thursday thoughts, and it's 2 steps. So I'll give you the first one and stop. So I'm just going to be blunt, I think. I'm really happy with our U.S. men's national team. I feel like, bias aside, that Berhalter could have put together a better squad. Nagbe should have gone hands down. Robinson is fighting for a loaded position. Goose is in a better form than Zach.
Let's talk about the roster for the Gold Cup. Let's go ahead and run into that. So goalkeepers, Zach Steffen, Tyler Miller, Sean Johnson. You're going to be a possession team. Zach Steffen with the ball at his feet is a bit of a liability. It is. You saw it last night. You saw it early on. Just a little slow to make a decision, nearly gives up a goal. You're not going to have that issue with Brad Kazan. I feel like Brad has been left in the dust, and it's a shame because Brad Kazan is as good or better than all 3 of the goalkeepers that are on this roster. Don't know why he has just been left out. Steffen is really good. Steffen's shot-stopping ability, really good. Yes, Manchester City signed him. They're going to loan him out. Looks like he's going to be in Germany. I don't think that should guarantee you a spot. He's going to have to perform, and he's going to have to be good in possession, and that's going to be a key because if you don't have that, your ability to play possession style is going to be limited. Brad Kazan and Tyler Miller both play in a possession style where they are involved on a regular basis. So Zach Steffen has, and he's worked with Greg Berhalter for a number of years, so I'm assuming that Berhalter is comfortable with it, but I feel like Brad's been left out. The way they played last night, Darlington Nagbe would have been a perfect fit. The way they played last night with essentially a box central midfield, 4 central midfielders, 2 more attacking, 2 more defensive, Darlington Nagbe would have been an absolutely perfect fit. Don't know why he's not getting a look. Berhalter's mentioned him before, talked about the schedule Atlanta's had, talked about different things, but ultimately not called in here. And Miles Robinson, when you compare to the defenders on this roster that are center backs, Tim Ream, Omar Gonzalez, Aaron Long, Matt Miazga, Walker Zimmerman. Ream can play out on the left as well. He played as a center back last night in a line of 3. The national pundits will tell you that Walker Zimmerman has been the best center back in MLS this year. I would say Miles Robinson has, but Zimmerman's been really good. Not going to quibble too much about Zimmerman being there. Gonzalez was the best defender for the U.S. last night. And I know there's a lot of negativity towards Omar Gonzalez. He was good last night. Not going to argue that one too much. Aaron Long has been outstanding over the last couple of years. He should be here. Miazga was he wore your captain's armband last night. Don't know about that decision so much, but Miazga and what he's done in Europe, I want him to be more consistent, but okay, he gets that call. Miles not being part of the final Gold Cup roster, even though he's probably been the best of the 3 Atlanta United players who are on the preliminary roster, not completely shocked. I think Daniel said it best when you're talking about a loaded position. You've got a lot of options. I think Miles will end up playing his way into this group over the next year and a half. Tim Ream's there because he can play as a left back. He gives you flexibility. You can do some different things with him. So I'm okay with that. 6 midfielders is what you're taking. Michael Bradley, Will Trapp, Christian Roldan, Weston McKennie, Christian Pulisic, Dwayne Holmes. Forwards, Josie Altidore, Jossie Zardes, Tyler Boyd, Paul Areola, Jordan Morris, Jonathan Lewis. Feels like you're taking a lot of defenders and not a lot of other options. I'll be curious to see how this roster plays out in a tournament format. Bradley and Trapp are your holding. Roldan is more of your 8. McKinney can be an 8. Adams can play as a holding, even though Tyler Adams is listed as a defender in this group. Even RB Leipzig kind of had a joke about that on Twitter. Should tell you something. Nick Lima is on there as an outside back. Daniel Lovitz is an outside back. I don't believe Roldan truly provides depth as a number 10. I think Nagbe would give you more depth as a number 10. Roldan is better defensively than Nagbe. And if you're going to take Bradley and Trapp and McKinney, I don't know if Roldan is exactly what you need here. I thought Dwayne Holmes was good last night too, and he's probably earned his spot because of that. I'm surprised Nagbe's not here. He feels like the biggest miss for the way Berhalter wants to play from what we've seen so far.
The second step from Daniel. I know he, meaning Berhalter, was being experimental last night with the roster, but it didn't work. I'm hoping we do well in Gold Cup, but I'm honestly scared for our chances. At least the U20s are looking great. Hashtag overreaction. Thursday thoughts.
Got to get to the final. I honestly don't want to hear excuses. You got to get to the final. The U.S. at home should reach the final of this tournament. I just don't think there is a valid excuse for them not to. I don't care about 2022 right now. I don't care about working on strengthening the depth for World Cup qualifying. I'm not worried about any of that at the moment. The U.S. in the last CONCACAF competition, which was the Hex, finished 5th out of 6. They can't take the Gold Cup for granted. Can't do that. You got to go out and try to win this thing. And right now, Mexico looks like they're a step and a half above everybody. You got to get to the final. And you've got to get out of a group with Guyana, Panama, and Trinidad and Tobago. You should be able to do that no problem. But the team's not exactly inspiring a lot of confidence right now. Backs against the wall a little bit. They're going to have to show something in this group stage. Then you start getting into knockout rounds. Anything less than the final is going to be a disappointment. It's at home. Everything should be set up for you to get there. There's no excuse. It's not okay to say we're looking down the road, because if you just keep looking down the road, then you don't actually do what's in front of you. This is a continental championship that you are the primary host for. I don't buy that it's okay not to get to the final.
Shouldn't there be a sense of urgency attached to something like that?
Yeah, and it doesn't really feel like there is, and that's been the primary thing coming out of last night is, it's a friendly, it's okay. I'm not so sure it's okay. You do need to try some stuff, but how different was what Berhalter did last night tactically than what we've seen before? It's moving some pieces around, but ultimately, is what you tried last night going to help you win the Gold Cup? I don't think so. I don't think going from the 4-man back line that morphs into 3 when Tyler Adams comes inside to play as a holding midfielder next to Bradley or Trapp, I don't think it's ultimately that different than what you did last night, which was more or less not having the morphing happen and just playing in that type of shape to begin with. I don't know if you have the players to do either one in the way that you're trying to do it. It's a Gold Cup. You don't have a lot of time with this team. In my opinion, you keep things simple and you play guys where they're most comfortable, and you pick the best group in a system that is the most comfortable for them to get results. Tyler Adams playing in a very different role than what he's accustomed to, learning on the job, feels like a stretch. It feels like maybe you're trying too hard. I think with who you've picked now, your 23-man roster, all right, Stefan's obviously Berhalter's guy. You need to make the decision, do you want 2 up top or do you want 1 between Josie Altidore, Jossie Zardes? I think you probably want one of them because you don't have any other true forwards. Jordan Morris could be the other one in a pinch. So I think you're probably playing some version of a 4-3-3, whether it's 4-2-3-1 or a 4-1-4-1 or a true 4-3-3. You're playing some version of that. So that means you're playing 4 in the back. My 4 in the back, day one, would probably be Lima on the right. I guess in this group you're going to go Lovitz on the left. You could go Ream. Either one is okay. I would probably lean towards Lovitz. And then I think he would go with Gonzalez and Miazga. I would probably lean towards Miazga and Long. That would be my back line. Holding midfield, this is where you got to make a decision between Bradley and Trapp. I'd play one of them and then play Tyler Adams with them. Or you play Adams as you're holding. You scrap Bradley and Trapp. You play McKinney, and you play Pulisic as a 10. Or you're going to play Pulisic out wide and play Bradley or Trapp with Adams and then McKinney. There's a lot of ifs and ors, isn't there?
Yep.
That's not good.
Too many.
It's not good. Tyler Boyd, you want to see him. He's just become eligible to play. Okay. I would probably lean to Pulisic wide. Going through it and looking at the options and looking at the permutations of it, I like Pulisic inside as a 10, but I think with this group that was picked, for me it'd be Bradley and Adams together with McKinney, probably just slightly in front. Adams can float back and forth. Pulisic on one side, Boyd on the other, out the door is your number 9. That's probably your best lineup to start the Gold Cup. But I don't know if that's
Carlos Rangel. Yeah. Carlos Rangel says Christian Roldan is not a number 10.
No, he's not. I like Roldan's game a lot. I think he's a 6/8. I like him. I liked him paired up with Osvaldo Alonso in Seattle. I like him paired up with Gustav Svensson in Seattle. I don't like him as a 10. I like him as an 8 making late runs into the attack, not trying to drive the attack. And in this team, if you've got McKinney, Adams as those types of players, Roldan, to me, is a little bit on the outside looking in. If you want somebody who can be a pseudo 10 but strong in possession and can defend, well, there's a guy who wears number 6 in Atlanta who would be, I think, the prototype for that. And I'm a little surprised that he's not there.
Bartimus Prime, why is Greg Berhalter so lazy in selecting players for the USMNT? This roster shows he didn't take the time to actually evaluate anyone.
I think that's harsh. I think because we disagree in the evaluations, I don't think he's lazy. I would not call Greg Berhalter lazy at all. One of the harder working managers in MLS during his time, put in a lot of time on tactics and stuff. I honestly think it might be the other way around. I think he might be overthinking it. I think he's trying a little bit too hard to put his stamp on it and show that he's up to this job instead of keeping it simple and growing into it. I just think the way you approach a national team and the way you approach a club team are so different. And that was my number one concern with Berhalter in this job, was because he has primarily worked at a club level implementing a philosophy over time, as opposed to keep the philosophy simple, pick the right players, and then put them in positions to succeed. I think at a national team level, that has to be the primary focus.
Daniel says it should never be acceptable to not make the finals. At minimum, if we don't make it, it's honestly a step back for U.S. soccer. Mexico will smoke us and laugh to the bank. Who's our next coach?
Nah, that's harsh. If the tournament's going to be held in the U.S., yeah, you should make the final. I agree with that. There are teams in CONCACAF who can legitimately outplay you. Mexico's one, obviously. We know that. Costa Rica can, although I don't think they're in their best moment. Jamaica has lately, and that's a little surprising based off the overall quality of the roster. Panama has in the past. I think they're in an even worse moment than Costa Rica. I think their golden generation is mostly done. I think they're starting to reload. Those are the ones that I would be worried about. Honduras, I think, should get back there, but they're not there. They're not where they used to be. So, yes, the U.S. on paper should beat all of those. I don't think a failure to make the final would mean you're looking for a new coach. That ship has sailed. You waited so long on this one. You are rolling with Greg Berhalter. And you should, because of the way the whole thing's been handled. You can't rush it at this point. You don't have the opportunity to. You don't have the time to. But he's going to have to make some adjustments if this doesn't work. If he is trying so hard to implement a philosophy this early and it's not clicking, he's going to have to be willing to take a step back on that and be willing to keep it simple to get these results at the national team level. It reminds me in a lot of ways of some of the early days of Klinsmann, where there was a lot of talk about style and philosophy and taking guys out of their comfort zone and playing them in unfamiliar roles and positions and all those types of things. In a club over time, you can develop that. In a national team, you can't. That's not your job. Your job is to win games. It's pretty simple. Your job is to win games and qualify for tournaments and do well in tournaments. The club managers, then you're focused on long-term development. That's where that stuff happens. It doesn't happen at the national team level. And I just want that hopefully to be the case here, because I'm worried that we're trying to add elements to Tyler Adams' game that RB Leipzig is like, we don't really care. We're not going to play him in that role. And that's where he plays how many games compared to how many games to the national team? How many training sessions with RB Leipzig compared to how many training sessions with the U.S. national team? Yeah, you get my drift.
At Cuppers, Alex says he's really glad the USMNT went with Berhalter and didn't even interview Tata. And then it's a wry, shrugged grin emoji, hashtag overreaction Thursday, hashtag Thursday thoughts.
I really do like the play-by-play on emojis that you try to provide. It's good work. It's good effort.
I'm trying, because I don't use them. I have to figure out how to describe them somehow.
I said good effort. I didn't say accurate. Good effort, though. That's good.
Well, I don't know what to call it, because, I could do the shrug shoulders emoji, but I don't know what the raising of the people's eyebrow emoji is, other than calling it that.
I don't think it has anything to do with The Rock, but yes, I get the reference, and yes, I think it was an absolute mistake not to interview Tata Martino, even if you'd already made your decision, even if you decided that you wanted an American manager for the national team. There's a lot of people who would agree with that sentiment, and I'm not against it. In a perfect world, yeah, I would agree. I think a domestic manager for a national team understands the player pool better. In a perfect world, all things considered, yes. You had Tata Martino, who worked here for 2 years, though. You had Tata Martino, who was understanding, I think, the American game. And you had a manager with his credibility, his track record, who was interested in the job. Multiple times speaking to national television broadcasters, he wanted to be considered for the job. He wanted an opportunity to talk about the job. Why you don't have that conversation, even if it's to say, look, we don't think this is going to be the right fit, but I'd love to hear what you would do with this team.
Mind-boggling.
You take it as an opportunity to maybe see an outside perspective and learn something from it, even if you're not going to go in that direction. The fact that it didn't even happen, and it really seemed like it was kind of dismissive about the whole thing, that's a shame, and it's a wasted opportunity.
And transitioning into one of the other matches that happened last night, Ricky Ricardo says he went to the Mexico versus Venezuela match last night, my first international match. The energy in that building was unlike anything I've ever felt before. Was feeling all of the feels, seeing Joseph and Tata reunited. And now I'll just wait for the U.S. Soccer Federation to get it together. Hashtag come to Atlanta.
Yeah, they're going to have to make some decisions about turf and putting grass over it. That is definitely a big issue here with that. Mexico and Tata Martino was fine playing on the turf. They did not want to put grass over the turf. You see U.S. Soccer will be putting grass over the turf at Nippert Stadium in Cincinnati this weekend as they play Venezuela. It's probably the biggest stumbling block to it. So that's something that, look, my hope over time is that the technology and the advancements are there to be able to play on grass at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. You're not going to be able to play on grass in any kind of a traditional way right now because the way everything is structured, the way the roof is, it won't grow. So it's going to have to be something new, something different, a different way of doing it. I remember the Tottenham Stadium idea that was shown at one point about, I think, turf for their NFL games at Tottenham Stadium would be like dropped in over top of a grass field or vice versa.
Like a pie plate in Arizona?
No, it's not that at all. It was nothing like that. That's a very unique situation where you're like rolling in a field. You're not going to be able to do that here either. So it's going to take some technological advances because right now you can't do it. Maybe in 5 years you can. And maybe you can find different ways to do it in the meantime for a friendly, but that's just where it is in terms of the U.S. playing here. And I want that to change as much as anybody else. But in terms of the game last night, I mean, Mexico takes care of business. Venezuela didn't play badly, but they were outclassed. Mexico's a better team. And Mexico looks like a team that is the odds-on easy favorite for the Gold Cup. Venezuela looks like a team that, is about where they've been. I'd like to see them make some noise at the Copa America, but, getting out of the group stage for them at that tournament, I think would be an accomplishment.
Let's see. Other questions in the queue. There was a super broad one here. Okay, here we go. Hudson, at the Mile High 17. If Atlanta United could add one extra DP, super broad, I know, who would you like to see and who would be ideal in Frank DeBoer's system? Y'all get me through mornings at work every day. Can't thank you enough. Hashtag keep it up. Hashtag Thursday Thoughts. Thank you, Hudson.
Well, sorry we couldn't get you through this morning, but needed to get through this morning myself. It happens.
Yeah.
It was a late night last night, and then was trying to get caught up on taking a car to the mechanic and doing some different things.
Oh,
and
whoa! I was not aware that the Soul was in need of
servicing. Relax, calm down. It's just servicing. It's just everybody else was doing it at the same time, so that was a wasted morning. Unable to get that done, so I set an appointment for next week. Anyway. A broad pick of a designated player if you get a fourth one. If there's a need in this team, and I honestly don't think there is in the current structure, I don't think there's a glaring need for this team to be an MLS Cup contender. The biggest spot I think you could improve it, and with Hudson mentioning Frank DeBoer's system specifically, I think it would be more of the number 6 that he wants, which would be a little bit closer to, in some ways, what Will Trapp and Michael Bradley provide, in that if you're going to dominate possession, you can have that type of 6, that type of defensive midfielder. If you're not going to dominate possession, and the national team, I think that's the biggest question, then it becomes a liability to have a ball-dominant defensive midfielder. Now, I think Bradley can give you more than Trapp can overall, although lately Bradley's defensive side has been a liability. Trapp has gotten better there, so maybe Trapp's passed him overall. I'm not sure. I think it's still a toss-up. But in this system where Atlanta wants to dominate possession and sets up in a way to dominate possession, I think having that type of midfielder, because Remedi feels like more of a ball winner to me, very good at it. He can be more of an 8. Jeff Lorenowitz is a little bit more of a hybrid. I don't think he's truly that ball-dominant passing central midfielder that you'd like to have. You're looking at some of the best players in the world, but a player like what Frankie de Jong brings to Ajax, I think that type of player is what would take this system from good to unbelievable. That's the only real need that I see. And it's not a critical need because you do have pieces that do work in this. And I do think that's why you're seeing Darlington Nagbe play centrally more and more in that type of role, because he is more of that ball-dominant central midfielder. He's not as comfortable further up the field. I think we've seen enough to see that when he's played in the system and he's played higher up the field. His half as a number 10 didn't really work. I thought it would. Others thought it would. It didn't. He just didn't look comfortable. So get him deeper where he's comfortable on the ball, helping you out of trouble, playing out of the back, and starting things moving forward. So maybe, in a lot of ways, Darlington Nagbe becomes that player that you might want to go get. But that would be, if I had if they changed the rules tomorrow and they allowed you to add another designated player, if you could go get an elite player at that level, that would be the type of player I would want.
Four-card Ahmed, linking to an article from the BBC. VAR replays to be shown on screens at Premier League matches. He asks, why can't MLS do this? Is it so hard and a life-altering decision? ? Thursday Thoughts.
I think some of it is the structure. I mean, remember, the MLS got out in front of VAR before anybody else did. They actually were involved in testing, and they jumped into it. They also do it differently than others do, with a video assistant referee, like assigned to the referee crew. They're in the stadium. The others do it from a centralized location. I think it's easier to beam what the VAR is looking at if it's at a centralized location. It's basically a screen share, essentially, to where you want it to go and get it in the stadium and do it that way. I think all that makes sense. I also think there is an element of still a little insecurity about wanting to show referees in a bad light. And I do understand it, but if the global standard is going to be show what they're looking at in the stadium, I think MLS needs to go along with that. I don't think they're going to be able to avoid it.
Kevin from Charlotte. Hopefully, Atlanta United's transfer strategy moving forward is to use the summer window for primary outgoing transactions. It's important for them to build the depth to do that, but more buyers in the summer mean more bids and leverage. Tito this summer and Barco next summer.
Yeah, it's I don't know if I love that idea either, though, because if you are just looking to move guys out in the summer, you could potentially be shorting yourself as the season goes on, as you get into the second half. I think if you do that, then you have to be looking at a quick turn on somebody to replace that player. So it's just doing your homework, I mean, more than anything. And I think Atlanta has shown that generally they've done that. You haven't seen them seem to have open roster spots. You know what I mean? And whereas other teams, it feels like, okay, a sale comes up, cool, let's take that money. Oh, yeah, what are we going to do now? It doesn't seem like Atlanta functions that way. So if they're thinking about it that way, like, okay, we have this player who is excess to what we're doing currently, and there's an offer, and cool, we're going to take it, I think they would have an idea of replacing the depth that player provides. If you do that, you can make it work. But it's tricky just because of the calendar, and it's tricky because of perception too. I mean, when you're selling in the summer in your mid-season point, or even late in that window as you're getting into the final third of the season, and you're pushing for a playoff spot and all that, you have to manage the perception of it. And I think it's different for an Atlanta who is expected to be around the top of the table. It feels like more fine-tuning, as opposed to a team that has an offer. And I think Taylor Twellman was actually caught up in this now that I'm watching the halftime show and seeing Taylor Twellman on my screen. I think he was caught up in this with New England, where they didn't want to sell him because you're getting ready for the playoff push. And they had a really good offer that probably would have been great for his career. I think it was Preston North End, if I remember at the time. And they didn't want to make the sale because of perception and because of what it would do to the playoff push. That's another issue here with where this window falls for MLS that makes it a trickier window. But this year, I think I I think the shade is off of MLS now, and everything is out in the spotlight. So after what Miguel Almiron did, after what Alphonso Davies has done, other American players in Europe who even aren't MLS products, but I think the idea of, wow, there's good players there, we need to go look, and yes, they're worth the money that now has been spent. It's going to be harder for MLS clubs to say no to some of the offers. Albert Ellis seems to fit into this. He's one that I would be watching for. Players of that ilk that are on clubs like a Houston, that it's going to be harder for them to say no. It's going to be harder for them to adequately replace that player too.
Going into Open Cup, Tafka put out a starting 11 with a bench, and I think there's too many internationals.
You can have 5.
There's too many internationals.
What does he have?
Can, Ambrose, Pogba,
1.
Miles, Gallagher, Lorenowitz, Kratz, Dion,
2.
PT,
3.
Carlton, Romario, in net backing up more.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the bench, he's got Parkhurst, Benitez.
That one might be tricky. That would be 4, and that one, I think you can pull that off with the short-term deal. Yeah, he's not on loan, so yes, you can. So that would be 4.
Okay, because I was thinking that might be 5. And then he had Nagby, Miram, Vasquez, and Remedi.
Remedi would be 5.
Yes.
So yeah, you would be good.
But then he had, if Miram wasn't back from international duty, adding Tito or Gressel.
You could add Gressel. You couldn't add Tito if you kept everybody else the same.
Michael Head wanted to move away from the USMNT crap fest.
Thank you.
And ask if Romario was on the Jamaica squad or not.
No, he's not. He was not picked.
Then Daniel wants to know, why don't you coach the men's national team?
No, you don't want that. I have not coached anywhere near that level, so I would fail more than Greg Berhalter or anybody else would. There are far more qualified candidates.
Let's see. Then Bart came back, and I guess this would be I'm going to read his thought and then have a question. He says, why does Greg Berhalter believe that Josh Sargent isn't ready to compete in the Gold Cup? Someone needs to rationally justify this to me. Then let me ask, if Jordan Morris is still injured, could not Sargent be put in his place?
I believe that, yes, Sargent could be put in Morris's place if there is an injury before the tournament. I think you had to be on the preliminary roster to be able to replace, and you can only replace before the tournament starts for your team. So you're running out of time, but yeah, I'm pretty sure you could do that. I don't know why he's not here. And for me, when you didn't put him on the U20 team, that meant you locked him into this roster. Flat out. Full stop. No matter where you feel, no matter if you get him into camp and you're like, ooh, I don't think he's ready. You can't burn his U20 time for nothing. And that's what it feels like. Because if you put Josh Sargent on the U20 team, it's a different conversation for that team. It's a different conversation for him. And you don't do that because you think he can be with the first team. He has to be with the first team. No questions asked. If it came down, and take that out of it, let's say he's 21. Let's say he's not eligible for the U20 team. But he's 21, young player, and you have Jossie Zardes there. Zardes is not having a great season. I know Jossie Zardes had played for Berhalter last year. I think some of the treatment of Jossie Zardes is harsh. I do. I think he is a national team pool player. But if he's not going to start for you, if he's not the guy, and Josie Altidore is, then Sargent should be the backup instead of Zardes. I don't think Zardes gives you as much off the bench as you get with Sargent there, both in terms of the experience for him and in terms of the spark he gives you. I think he's a better option off the bench than Jossie Zardes. So I don't like the way the roster was constructed. I'm not the biggest fan of it, and I really don't like the way Sargent was treated in this. If there was any question that he would not be on the final roster for the Gold Cup, he had to go to the U20s and be the man for that team. And, hey, it's opened a door for Sebastian Soto and great for Soto, but Josh Sargent should be playing for a national team this summer. There's no excuse why he's not.
Agreed. Circle gets the square. Michael Ruiz says that the magical fourth DP should be Juan Fer.
Well, no, I mean, if you're not thinking about tactics or anything like that, sure. I'd love to see Quintero. Absolutely. There's a ton of players like that I would love to see. If you did that, then you would play what? Quintero, Pitti, Barco, and Joseph? That'd be outstanding. That'd be a lot of fun. Remember, Marcelo Gallardo had some issues getting Quintero and Pitti on the field together for River. So that would factor into it. I think just for me, like if you got an extra player like that, an extra designated player spot, you could probably strengthen the team in a different way. And I think having a six, the type of six that would fit this system even better, would take the team to a whole nother level, more than another outstanding attacking player and one of the best in Juan Fer, but a little more of a surplus in a position that you already have great talent in, as opposed to changing the way you can play a bit.
A couple of other news notes and nugs, as they say. No
I think
Neymar.
Pauly Shore said nugs. That was a long time ago.
No Neymar, and Rocco Camiso now owns Fiorentina.
So the Camiso thing is done?
According to Fiorentina on the Twitters.
Okay, then it's done.
Rocco B. Camiso y il nuovo proprietario del club.
And we'll see how the Cosmos fans feel about that.
Cosmos
Neymar,
put it out as one of their releases.
What's that?
The Cosmos actually had that as a release.
Oh, well,
today.
I mean, he owns it too. So, yeah, I mean, obviously. But I'm wondering how the Cosmos fans feel about that is the question. Because there's been all the Rocco Camiso is going to change American soccer because of the Cosmos and whatever league they're going to play in, which there's a lot of questions with all that because, man.
Yes.
If you want to get caught up on that stuff, make sure you're following Midfield Press and make sure you're following Sock Takes. They do a great job of the lower divisions and everything happening with NISA and NPSL and Founders Cup and all kinds of things that are going on in that world. It's really hard to follow. I mean, there's an NISA team that is set to be in Atlanta, and I know zero about it. And it's supposed to start
I think
playing
Jarrett
in
knows more than we do.
No, and he knows more about the place that reportedly the ownership group had originally tried to put an NASL team into. But nothing's happened at the site, not the team. He doesn't know anything about the team because nobody does. The team and that project were not the same thing. Again, it leads to the confusion because people don't know because nothing's being said. If you want to keep up with that stuff, and it's an important thing, and I want to see the game grow, and this level is a very important level for the game to grow in. But, man, some of the things that are getting discussed and getting argued about, it's just quibbling about things. What does this do to the Cosmos? It's a legitimate question. I mean, you're not going to be taking the Cosmos as seriously as you were before. You can't. You got a Serie A team in Fiorentina, a big team. So what does this mean? I don't know. Have to wait and see. But check out, Sock Takes had a good recap of some of the issues that the NPSL Founders Cup is going through right now. Midfield Press has had some good stuff on NISA and some of the things that they're trying to get through. So it's very important, and I don't want to dismiss it in that it's not important. I just want it to be done the right way, and that's becoming more of an issue as we get deeper and deeper into the calendar because Founders Cup and NISA are supposed to kick off this fall, and it sounds like there's lots of questions about both, and it sounds like ownership groups are kind of weighing between the two. So who knows? Who knows who's going to be where and how it's going to go and what rules are going to be in place and what kind of sanctioning they're going to have. It all feels very up in the air on June 6th, and I think both are expected to start playing in September. So we'll see. Camiso with Fiorentina, it's probably good for him. It should be good for him. We'll see what it means for the New York Cosmos and the effect on American soccer. Neymar being ruled out of Copa America, it's not exactly a surprise. One, the injury was, a legitimate concern, but also the legal situation. The injury becomes a convenient concern. And it's very possible that this was a combination of things rather than, I believe, ruptured ankle ligaments is what was officially said.
Yes.
Because that can be an ankle sprain, and we don't know if that's short-term, long-term, what have you. It's probably a little more complicated than that based off of the potential legal situation that Neymar is in.
Mm-hmm. Due to the seriousness of the injury, Neymar will not have the physical conditions and sufficient recovery time to participate in the Copa America Brazil 2019.
No, that's very possible. I mean, it's very, very possible that that's the case. But it's very possible that there's other things that are potentially making that more complicated. So
yes,
we shall see.
2 for tied air. Montreal beats Seattle.
Yes, good win for Montreal. Hate to see an MLS match on June 5th with neither team being able to fill a complete bench. And that's due to injury and due to international absences, and it's not a good situation. But really good for Safir Taider. They get 2 goals, in the last 15 minutes to turn that one around and get a win after a penalty kick. Tom Bogert, who writes for MLS Soccer, has an update on Sebastian Soto, who has turned a lot of heads with the U20s. Maybe keep an eye on Real Salt Lake and Sebastian Soto. He is an RSL Academy product. He is having a reported contract impasse at Hanover. And Bogert just filed a piece over at MLSsoccer.com with a quote from Craig Weibel, the general manager of Real Salt Lake. And he said, when asking if he is keeping an eye on things, he said, "I don't want to come off as snarky, but yes, that's my job." And when asked if he had interest in bringing Soto back, he said, "Our job as an organization is to keep track of these players, maintain the relationship with these players. They come from wonderful families. I've had individual conversations with Sebastian and his family. I told them when the time comes and the interest is there, we'll have you back." That would be a great addition for Real Salt Lake in the second half of the year if they could pull that one off.
And as I sit here and scan, NYCFC in Cincinnati tonight, it's 7.
I believe they will have full benches. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Little bit of an update. I know, and a lot of people ask about it. Gordon Stevenson from the New York Red Bulls posted that per the new deal with the U.S. Open Cup and ESPN, that they were unable to provide Red Bulls radio broadcast of the Red Bulls Open Cup match. We're in the same boat. The audio rights have been sold to ESPN. ESPN Radio has the radio rights. I would assume that would just be the porting over from the ESPN Plus broadcast. So we are unable to broadcast the Atlanta United Charleston match. We were ready to go. Everything was booked. We were heading over to Charleston on Tuesday. So that is not happening now. Unless something changes, and it doesn't look like it will, we will not have a radio broadcast. And the only way to watch Atlanta and Charleston, the only way to watch anyway, was ESPN Plus. But the only way to take it in any form or fashion is on ESPN Plus on Tuesday night.
And I think we are officially caught up.
I believe so. Bartimus Prime chimed in, I believe, on the conversation around...
Yeah, straight up embarrassing. An MLSer who hasn't been healthy for a while is on the roster when a guy who's played and scored in the Bundesliga is left out.
Yeah. Now, let's one thing to be a little real about Sargent. He did score in the Bundesliga, but he also was struggling to make 18s by the end of the year. So that part's true. I have the bigger issue, though, that you didn't take him to the U20s to take him here, and now you don't take him here. Yeah. That's the part that is completely wrong to me. If you're not taking him to the U20s, you have to take him here, no questions asked. He's number one on the roster at that point because you've made that decision. You can't blow the summer for the kid. That's the part that I don't like, is that now he's not playing in a World Cup. He's not playing in the Gold Cup. It's good for him in some ways, and Paul Kennedy from Soccer America pointed this out. It is good for him in some ways that now he will go back to Werder Bremen early. He won't, come in late after the Gold Cup. He won't come in tired after the Gold Cup. He's going to come in early. He's going to be able to fight for time. That will help him. He could have done that if he went to the U20 World Cup, like Tim Weah. That's the issue. He should have been on the U20 World Cup roster. If there was any question, he should have been on that U20 roster. That's the bigger issue with me about it. So, other news that I have seen, just things to throw out there. Mike Lapper, who was the interim head coach and the assistant with the New England Revolution, he has moved on as Bruce Arena is filling out his staff, and he will be looking for a head coaching gig. That is according to Pro Soccer USA. He didn't lose with the Revs after taking over, so that's a really good sign. He's another one that has been around for quite a while, former national team player. He's been in the mix, so add him to the list of potential managers. And when you look at a Colorado situation, for example, I think he would be somebody to consider. I still am on the road.
Connor Casey.
You let him, you see what you have at least. I mean, he might not be the guy. Ultimately, he might not be the guy, but you see what you have first before you move on, because you don't have a ton of money to work with. You're paying 2 coaches. You're paying 2 guys who aren't your head coach. It happens sometimes. Wasn't it Georgia Tech basketball that was in this boat where they just couldn't get anybody because they had so much money on the books?
Yeah, because they were still paying Paul Hewitt and his astronomical contract. And then
it limits you sometimes. I mean, they re-upped with Mastroeni after a great 2016 where he took them to the Western Conference Final, but that year was a blip. The rest of the years with Mastroeni weren't good, so then that limited what you could do with your next manager, and then that really didn't work out. I'd love to know down the road. Hudson's track record was spotty when he was hired, but there was some promise in it. I don't think he really had a great roster to work with either. And was it Hudson who was pushing for the players that they signed last season? Was it the GM who gave him those players? Is it somewhere in the middle? Because I think last year they just didn't have a good enough roster, and I think the managing was an issue. This year they had a better roster, and the results never turned. So it was time to go. But with the constraints you have, Connor Casey's in place. He gets the club. I think he loves the club. See what you've got. It seems like he's got a pretty good idea about what he wants to do. Give it a whirl.
Yep.
Give it
I'm
a
all
whirl.
for
Work
it.
for Ben Olsen. See what you have.
Yep. Let it ride.
Yep.
Don't forget to fix your fantasy teams.
Yes. You have today. Oh, sorry. Yeah, good point from Tafka. Tito is not listed as an international on that MLS roster website either. He was another one I think that changed quietly. So Tafka's roster is good. I take back my counting on you.
Okay. Don't forget to fix your fantasy teams.
Yes, fantasy teams. Get them set. If you're thinking about players tonight, you have no double game weeks, so you have to look at each of these games as they pop up. Tonight's game, I mean, I'm looking at NYC players in a pretty big way.
Chanot, Tennerholm, Maxi Morales.
Yeah. Hebert, anybody. I think you're looking at NYC players in a really big way here. Feels like a pretty good win for them tonight.
And thanks to the Jason Wright Agency at Jason Wright with a WAGEN on Twitter and on Facebook for all of the intel and the info that he gives us on a weekly basis. And this is apparently the last week of the first half of the season.
Yes, it is. We will be back in a normal time slot tomorrow morning. We will also have Atlanta United 2 action on ESPN Plus tomorrow evening.
Yes.
We'll have draft picks or prize picks updates tomorrow for the weekend games. Let's see real quick before we go. Since
Get your
freeform
E
edition.
selections in.
Yeah, let's see if we got anything for tonight. Yes, they do have some players for tonight. A-Bear is on there at 5.5. That
Ooh, over.
pretty good. Ismail Tajori Shradi's on there at 3.5. A little more questionable.
Avoid.
Those are your two options for tonight, and we'll go through the rest of it tomorrow with the rest of the guys who play this weekend. But remember, over at myprizepicks.com, you can sign up. First time, use the code SDH. 25% of that initial deposit gets matched. You get a free 2-pick play for $25. You don't have to pay $25. You get a free $25 pick of 2 players. You can mix and match. You've got NBA Finals, you've got NHL, you've got WNBA, you've got Major League Baseball, you got tennis, you got MMA, you got golf, you got esports, all kinds of stuff. Your esports pick, they don't have the board up right now, so we'll have to check that. I don't know the schedule for esports anymore, so maybe it's up for the weekend. I'll have to see if we can find another esports pick of the week. I don't know the teams or leagues or players or any of that, but,
I don't either.
Is what it is. It works, so go for it. I think that's it.
That's it.
Okay.
Skyrockets in flight, Afternoon Delight. Thanks for putting up with us at 3 o'clock Eastern.
Yeah, sometimes these things happen. We'll be back tomorrow morning, 9 in the morning. We'll get you set for the weekend. We'll talk Women's World Cup because that kicks off tomorrow afternoon. We'll talk U.S. men's national team some more because they play Venezuela over the weekend. We'll talk MLS for the weekend, and we'll talk about the Twos since they host the baby Red Bulls tomorrow night. That's going to be a really good game. If you're in town and you're looking for something to do tomorrow night, I would highly recommend that one. I think it's going to be a fun
You're one of the first 200
match.
in the door. I think you get an ATL UTD2 Military Night hat as well.
Very cool. So
looking pretty sweet.
Get your ticket, get there early, get a hat,
get your lid,
and come watch it.
That.
But until tomorrow morning, mucho platio.
Mucho platio.